road trip. Anyone. Well, buckle up, because this deep dive isn't about scenic overlooks or quirky roadside attractions. No, we're going international this time. We're headed to Nigeria to explore their road system.
You could say it's a bit more intense than your average Sunday drive.
A bit. Let's just say navigating Nigeria's roads is a fascinating study in the ongoing battle between nature's fury and, well, shall we say, budgetary realities.
It's a bumpy ride, that's for sure. And look, we're not just talking potholes here, although I'm sure there are plenty. This is about how Nigeria's incredibly diverse terrain, from rainforests to savannas, throws some serious challenges at something most of us take for granted roads.
And it's not just a matter of inconvenience, is it? This actually impacts everything from, the price of basic goods to, sadly, even human lives.
Right. It's a significant issue.
So before we dive into solutions, for our listeners who haven't experienced driving in Nigeria, set the scene for us. What's it actually like out there?
Okay, so picture this. You're cruising through, let's say, the southern region. Think lush rainforests, vibrant green, but the road ahead. It's more like a water slide thanks to almost constant rainfall.
Yikes.
Yeah, it's a real challenge. This report, Resilient Roads, Managing Road Assets in Nigeria's Challenging Terrain and Climate. Catchy title, right? Well, it points out that constructing even 1 kilometer of road in these conditions, it can cost 3 times more than in other areas.
Wow.
Yeah. And then you shift gears, head north, and suddenly you're in arid savannas. Except now, instead of rain, it's the scorching heat that's the problem. Asphalt cracking under the pressure, like a dropped mirror.
Intense. You start to wonder, are we just using the wrong kind of asphalt? Is there a super asphalt out there that can handle it all?
You'd think, wouldn't you? It's not quite that simple, though. See, the report highlights that it's not just the intensity, but the wild swings between these extremes. You have these prolonged rainy seasons, and then, bam, unpredictable dry spells. It's like the weather is playing a cruel joke on the road maintenance crews.
They must feel like they're always one step behind.
Exactly.
So no easy fixes then. What kind of approach do you even take with that level of diversity in the challenges?
Right. And that's the thing. You need these very tailored solutions. In the South, it's all about having incredibly robust drainage systems to handle those torrential downpours, right? But then in the North, you got to source materials that can withstand those insane temperature swings without just crumbling.
Okay, so it's complicated, but I have a feeling it gets even more complicated.
Oh, if only it were that simple.
Yeah.
Because on top of these geographical challenges, you've got another massive roadblock. A financial one. And we're not talking about a few potholes here. This is a systemic issue. In fact, the report uses this phrase, low statutory budgetary provisions.
Catchy.
Right. But essentially it means there's a chronic lack of funding for road maintenance in Nigeria.
Okay, so that's a critical point, because it's not just about knowing how to fix the roads, it's actually having the resources to do it.
Yeah.
So what does that lack of funding look like on the ground, practically speaking?
Imagine, instead of repaving a road, you're constantly patching potholes with, whatever you can get your hands on. Scraps, really. That's the reality in many places. In fact, get this, the report states that Nigeria is facing, get ready for it, it's a tough situation, no question. But, even with all these challenges, the report does offer a glimmer of hope. It talks about how tackling this crisis head on, it requires a multifaceted approach. It's not as simple as just throwing money at the problem.
Right, because as we've seen, money's only part of the issue.
Yeah.
So what are some of the solutions that this report highlights? I know it mentioned something about public-private partnerships.
Yes.
And it sounds promising, but I'm not entirely sure what that looks like in action.
Okay, so imagine, for example, you have a local construction firm, right? And they team up with an international company that specializes in, let's say, building roads, but specifically in tropical climates. They could then, pool their resources, share expertise, bring the best of both worlds to the table, or picture this, private investors. They could fund a major highway project with the understanding that they'll recoup their investment through tolls down the line.
So it's like leveraging the strengths of different sectors, like assembling a dream team, but for road construction.
Yeah.
I like it. What are some of the other potential benefits of this kind of approach?
Well, for one, it can bring a much-needed influx of capital into the road construction and maintenance sector, which we've already established is desperately needed. But it's not just about the money, right? The private sector often brings this level of efficiency, innovation. They often have access to cutting-edge technology that, frankly, government agencies just might not have. Think about like new materials, advanced engineering techniques, that sort of thing.
Right. It's like bringing in the specialists who've tackled similar challenges, but in other parts of the world.
Exactly.
Makes a lot of sense. The report also mentioned something called remote sensing as a potential game changer. Now, that sounds incredibly high tech. Can you break that down for us? What is it, and how can it actually help fix roads?
Okay, so picture this. Drones are satellites, right? But they're equipped with these super high-tech cameras. And they're soaring over miles and miles of highway. But they're not just taking pretty pictures, they're scanning for even the tiniest cracks, signs of erosion, things that wouldn't even be visible from the ground.
Wow.
And then all that data they collect, it's analyzed to pinpoint potential problem areas before they become major issues.
So it's like giving these roads an X-ray from space. That's incredible. But how does that translate to action on the ground? What kind of repairs does this early detection allow for?
This is where it gets really cool. By identifying those issues early on, you're shifting from what we normally do, which is this reactive approach, right? Waiting for a pothole to appear before you fix it. But this is proactive. It allows for preventative maintenance.
Which is much cheaper in the long run, I'm assuming.
Significantly. And less disruptive, right? Instead of these massive reconstruction projects that shut everything down, you can address those potential problems with targeted repairs. Minimize the disruption.
So working smarter, not just harder. It really sounds like this technology could be revolutionary, especially for a country like Nigeria facing these unique challenges. But even with all the fancy technology and funding, that's still only part of the solution, right? Because the report also emphasizes the importance of getting local communities involved. Why is that so crucial?
Because it's about empowering those communities to be part of the solution, not just, passive bystanders. Imagine, for example, if villagers were trained to do basic road maintenance themselves, filling potholes, clearing drainage ditches, reporting issues quickly. They become the eyes and ears on the ground.
Right, because they're the ones who know the roads best, and they're the ones who are directly impacted by their condition. So it's about fostering that sense of ownership and responsibility.
Exactly, instead of just waiting for someone else to come and fix things.
Right.
And what the report argues is that by tapping into that local knowledge, that initiative, you create a much more sustainable and effective system. It's a collective effort, not just a top-down approach, which often can't keep up, especially in a country as massive as Nigeria.
Yeah, this deep dive has really highlighted just how interconnected this all is. It's not just about the roads themselves. It's the people, the technology, the funding, the policies. It's a whole ecosystem.
Absolutely. And while the challenges are undeniably significant, it's also clear there is no shortage of potential solutions. It's about bringing all these different pieces of the puzzle together, right? To create a more sustainable, resilient future for Nigeria's roads.
It's a complex issue. But it's encouraging to hear that there are dedicated people working on innovative solutions. Now, speaking of solutions, we've covered a lot of ground here. Are there any other potential avenues for improvement that we haven't touched on yet?
It's interesting to think about all of this, right? Because we often talk about infrastructure in terms of like concrete, steel, those big physical things. But this deep dive has really shown that it's about so much more than that. Oh, absolutely. At its core, it's about connecting people, right? Connecting them to opportunity, to healthcare, to each other. In fact, the report, it highlights this really powerful story about a young woman, Hadiza. She had to travel from her village to the nearest city for medical attention. But because a road had been washed out, the journey, which should have taken just a few hours, ended up taking almost an entire day.
Oh, no.
And by the time she reached the hospital, it was too late.
That's heartbreaking. And it really underscores that human cost of these infrastructure challenges, right?
Yeah.
It's easy to get caught up in the technical stuff, but ultimately, it's about people's lives.
Exactly. And that's where this idea of resilience comes in, because it's not just about, building roads that can withstand a rainstorm. It's about building systems that can adapt, that can thrive, even in the face of unexpected challenges. Climate change, economic fluctuations, you name it. It's about future-proofing, not just fixing the problems of today.
So if we think about resilience as the ultimate goal, what are some key takeaways from our deep dive? What does it actually take to build a truly resilient road network, especially in a place like Nigeria with all these challenges?
Well, I think there are a few crucial things to remember. First and foremost, there has to be a sustained commitment to funding, to investment, and it can't just be about filling budget gaps here and there. It needs to be a long-term vision, recognizing that infrastructure is key to economic and social progress.
Right. You can't just keep putting a Band-Aid on it and hoping for the best.
Exactly. Second, embracing innovation is key. We talked about remote sensing, but there's a ton of other promising technologies out there. New construction materials specifically designed for extreme climates, or even data-driven approaches to, let's say, optimize those maintenance schedules, making them more efficient.
So always be on the lookout for ways to work smarter, not just harder.
Absolutely. And then finally, and this might be the most important point, is remembering that resilient infrastructure isn't just about roads and bridges, it's about people.
Right. And we've seen that theme again and again today.
Yes, whether it's involving those local communities in the maintenance or ensuring that the transportation networks are actually designed to meet the needs of everyone, especially the most vulnerable, putting people at the heart of the solution.
It's about recognizing that human element.
Precisely. And that requires a collaborative approach, right?
Yeah.
It's got to be governments, the private sector, local communities, even international organizations all working together.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. It's amazing to me how something as, seemingly mundane as a road can actually reveal so much about a country's challenges and its opportunities. So as we wrap up here, what's your final takeaway for our listeners today? What's that one thing you really hope they remember from our deep dive?
I think it comes down to this. Roads, they're more than just concrete and asphalt. They're lifelines. And by investing in resilient infrastructure, Nigeria can unlock a smoother, safer, and ultimately a more prosperous future for everyone.
Could have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us on this journey. And listeners, we hope this deep dive has given you a new perspective, a new appreciation for the power of resilient infrastructure and the impact it has on people's lives. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep on learning.